Hello there everyone, Matt here with virtualinstructor.com, and in this lesson we're going to take a look at creating a realistic drawing of a glass marble using Prismacolor Premier colored pencils on Canson Mi-Teintes pastel paper. Now this particular lesson is also featured in this month's issue of Colored Pencil magazine. This is June of 2018. You can check out a step-by-step breakdown of this particular lesson in this issue. Now you can download this issue in digital format, but you can also get the hard copy. If colored pencils are your thing, then I definitely recommend taking a look at Colored Pencil magazine and perhaps even look into getting a subscription to this fine publication. Now, of course, we'll also have a step-by-step breakdown of this particular lesson over at virtualinstructor.com as well. Now, speaking of virtualinstructor.com, if you enjoy this lesson and this type of thing, then I know that you'll enjoy being a part of our membership program, which is truly comprehensive. We have video courses on drawing and painting, which also include downloadable ebooks. There's the weekly live lessons, there are the weekly critiques as part of the Members Minute, and also a year-long curriculum for visual arts teachers. To learn more about our program, just head over to virtualinstructor.com/members. You can also click on the card in the upper corner. If you want to check out 3 of our course videos and ebooks for free, you can do so. Again, there is a link available below this video, but also in the corner of this video right now. If you click on that, you'll see a link to check out those free videos. All right, with that, let's go ahead and take a look at this lesson. I hope you enjoy. For this lesson, we'll be working on Canson Mi-Teintes pastel paper. This paper does have a heavier tooth associated with it, or a heavier texture. We'll be using the smoother side of the paper, which still has an ample tooth associated with it, which will allow us to make multiple layered applications of the colored pencils. In fact, to get the type of textures that we want in this particular drawing, we'll have to apply multiple layered applications. We're also going to be using Prismacolor Premier colored pencils. We're going to be using an assortment of colors for this particular drawing. These pencils are nice and soft and very waxy, so they create almost a buttery feel once you have multiple layers applied to the surface. All right, with that being said, let's go ahead and get into the actual process. We'll start by first drawing a circle. If you have trouble drawing a circle freehand, you may use a circular object and trace a circle in place. In this case, I'm using a lid from a container of acrylic gel medium, but any circular object will do. In this case, I'm using a 10% gray, but you can also use another light color like white to draw in the contours with a light touch. Be sure to apply a light touch so you don't create indentations in the surface of the paper or make marks that may prove difficult to cover later in the process. White or a light gray is easily covered with subsequent applications of colored pencils if a light application is made. Once the circle is defined, we'll lightly define the shapes of color within the marble, as well as the shapes of highlight and shadow with simple contour lines. You can include as much information as you feel comfortable in these early stages. In this case, I'm just basically outlining the areas of shapes of color and value, especially the highlights and locations of shadow. After we've established these shapes, we'll draw an elliptical shape for the cast shadow and add the shapes for the strong highlights. Because the light source is lower down in space, this creates an elliptical shadow that's much longer and larger than the marble itself. And as I mentioned before, there are a couple of highlights found within the shadow itself, since as the light passes its way through the glass marble, the light is actually intensified. With our contour lines in place, we can begin adding the colors that are observed. We'll start with Scarlet Lake, and we'll begin carefully filling in the local color with the red areas of the marble. As we do so, we should be careful not to overlap our locations of strongest highlight. These areas should be preserved so that our highlights remain strong and pure when they are added. The applications are light at first, using medium pressure to apply the color. The yellow areas receive an application of sunburst yellow. Again, as this color is added, the highlights are avoided. Some of the sunburst yellow is applied over the bands of red to create additional interest and depth to the color, mainly in the areas where the value is slightly lighter. Sunburst yellow is also applied within the strongest highlights found within the cast shadow. We can add the strong highlights with white. Of course, heavier pressure is used in locations where the highlights are at their strongest. A combination of white and 10% French gray is applied to the body of the marble on the left side using lighter pressure. White is also applied within the strongest highlights found within the cast shadow. Now that our initial colors are in place, we can begin intensifying the color and adding a bit of depth. In the darkest areas within the red bands, we'll add Tuscan red. This color makes the value slightly darker and also adds quite a bit of depth to the color as well. We're not going to apply this color over all of the applications of red that we applied initially, just in the areas of darkest value. Here again, light to medium pressure is applied. We'll progressively get a little bit heavier with our applications as we get additional colors in place on the surface. Once these initial applications are in place with the Tuscan red, we'll go over the red bands again with another application of Scarlet Lake. Here again, this color helps to add additional depth. Some of our Tuscan red will show through the second applications of Scarlet Lake, leading to a more intense red and a red that has quite a bit more depth associated with it. As we continue to layer the colored pencil applications, our applications become more opaque and less of the tooth of the paper is showing through. In the lighter areas within the red bands, another application of sunburst yellow is applied. As we add these layered applications, we can refine the shapes of color and add any nuances that we see. The tooth, or texture of the paper, is suitable for accepting multiple applications of color, but produces a grainy texture. The surface texture of the marble should of course appear smooth. We can soften the texture to a degree by burnishing the applications that we have in place with a colorless blender. A colorless blender is simply a colored pencil void of any pigment. When it's applied, the wax from the pencil blends and smooths the color already in place on the surface. It helps to eliminate the grainy appearance by working the medium into the texture of the paper. Now we can turn our attention to broadening the range of value and increasing the contrast. To do this, we'll begin by adding dark umber to darken the shadows within the bands of color. Dark umber is a dark brown, and it's chosen to keep the shadows warm. Black is avoided since it tends to make colors appear flat and unnatural. As we darken the values around the highlights of course begin to stand out more simply because of the increase in contrast. We can use the dark umber with lighter pressure to create gradual changes of tone and value within the glass marble. Although outlining with colored pencils is generally discouraged, there are situations where you need to increase the contrast around the outer contour of certain objects. In this case, we need to do so. So we'll use the dark umber to reinforce the outer contour here. We'll also use the dark umber to establish a base application within the darkest area on the lower left quadrant of the marble, where we have a strong reflection and a shape of darker value. A few specks of darker tone are also added to communicate a few imperfections within the glass of the marble. After applying the dark umber, we can intensify the color further and brighten the red bands. Poppy red is applied over the red bands with a medium to heavy pressure. Here again, the addition of this color increases the depth of the color while intensifying it as well. Another application of the waxy colored pencil also helps to smooth the application, making the texture appear more consistent. A touch of sky blue light is applied to the area of strongest highlight in the reflected area in the lower left quadrant of the marble. And we'll also apply another application of 10% French gray and white over the left side of the marble. After these applications are made, they are burnished again with the colorless blender, lessening the grainy appearance produced by the texture of the paper. We'll also use the colorless blender to smooth out some of the texture found in the shape of darker value where we applied the dark umber. A touch of sunburst yellow is also applied in the area of highlight near this location. As I mentioned before, we're avoiding using black, but luckily we can create a more natural black by combining indigo blue with our dark umber applications. So in the locations of darkest value, especially along the bottom portion of the marble, we'll use the indigo blue right over the top of the dark umber to produce a more natural looking black. Then we can go back with a bit of white and start creating some of our lighter tones and values over the top of our red applications. Now we're ready to begin adding colors to the cast shadow. We'll start by adding a bit of dark umber to the majority of the shape, avoiding the areas of strongest highlight near the center. We'll apply more pressure to the pencil in the areas of darkest shadow. Over the top, we'll gently apply an application of indigo blue in the areas where the shadows are at its strongest. Orange, sunburst yellow, and white are also added to the areas of strongest highlight within the cast shadow. Then, using the colorless blender, we'll begin the process of burnishing these applications. As we begin burnishing, we'll notice that some of the colors that we've applied start to become more visible. We see little sections of brown where the shadow is a bit warmer, and little sections of blue where the shadow is a bit cooler. We can strengthen up the highlight where the light is at its most intense with an application of white. And then we can make the shadow around it a bit darker with additional applications of indigo blue and dark umber if necessary. Working in from the outer edges of the shadow, we'll add a medium application of 20% warm gray. This lightens the value slightly and also smooths the texture a bit more. We'll also apply this color around the entire outer edge of the cast shadow to help smooth the transition from shadow to raw paper. And just as we've done throughout the drawing, we'll use a colorless blender to smooth these applications and burnish them further, creating a smoother appearance. And now, our colored pencil drawing of a marble is complete. If you enjoyed this video, then I know that you'll enjoy being a member at thevirtualinstructor.com. Our comprehensive membership program includes video courses on drawing and painting, weekly live lessons, ebooks, lesson plans for teachers, weekly critiques, and much, much more. To learn more about our program, just visit thevirtualinstructor.com/members or click on the card in the upper right-hand corner. And if you want to check out 3 of our course modules for free, you can do so. Just click on the link on your screen now. And if you're watching this on YouTube, make sure that you subscribe to the channel. I look forward to seeing you in the next video.